It was a quiet evening in the suburbs, the kind of evening that felt peaceful and ordinary. The streets were mostly empty, with only a few cars passing by as the sun dipped below the horizon. In the midst of this calm, an unmarked black sedan moved steadily along the highway. Behind the wheel sat the FBI director, a man in his late 50s with years of experience navigating tense and dangerous situations. His day had been long, filled with briefings, meetings, and important decisions that carried weight across the country. Now finally, he was heading home, looking forward to a simple dinner and a quiet night. He drove carefully, following the flow of traffic, enjoying the brief sense of normalcy after the intensity of his day. His mind was still partially on work, thinking about cases, strategies, and the responsibility of leading one of the most important law enforcement agencies in the country. He had been driving for a while when he noticed a police car behind him, its lights flashing unexpectedly. The car had not been following him for long, but it was enough to cause a moment of concern. The director slowed down slightly, expecting a routine traffic stop. The officer who had pulled him over was young, in his early 20s, recently assigned to the area after completing the academy. He had been on patrol for only a few months and was eager to prove himself. When he saw the black sedan swerving slightly, he interpreted it as suspicious behavior. Adrenaline rushed through him as he decided to pull the car over, thinking he might be dealing with a dangerous situation. The officer's hands were slightly shaky, but he tried to maintain a professional composure. The FBI director complied immediately, pulling over to the side of the road. He kept his hands on the wheel, taking a deep breath as he prepared to explain himself. The officer approached the car cautiously, flashlight in hand and his voice tense as he instructed the driver to step out. The director remained seated, his hands visible on the wheel, and introduced himself calmly. He identified himself as an FBI official and showed his credentials, but the officer, overwhelmed by the sudden responsibility of the situation, did not lower his guard. Fear and inexperience clouded the officer's judgment. His mind raced through scenarios, some imagined, where an unmarked car could be carrying someone dangerous. Despite the clear identification, he reached for his gun and pointed it at the director. The gesture was automatic, a reflex born from fear and training that emphasized safety first. The director froze for a moment, aware that any sudden movement could escalate the situation, but he remained composed, raising his hand slowly and keeping his voice steady. "Officer, please lower your weapon," the director said calmly. "I am the FBI director." "I am not a threat." The words seemed to hang in the air, met with silence. The officer's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process what he was hearing. Everything inside him screamed caution, yet something about the calm authority in the director's voice made him hesitate. He glanced at the credentials again, the familiar badge and identification of a high-ranking federal official. Confusion mixed with fear, creating a tense standoff. The director, sensing the officer's nervousness, continued to speak in a controlled, measured tone. He reminded the officer that mistakes happen, but that this was a serious situation. He asked him to take a deep breath, to recognize who he was dealing with, and to lower his weapon before anyone got hurt. The officer, still tense, reluctantly eased his grip, though he did not fully lower the gun yet. Meanwhile, a few nearby drivers slowed down, curious about the scene unfolding. Some stopped to watch, others took out their phones, recording what they saw. The situation drew attention, though no one intervened. The director kept his focus on the officer, knowing that the surrounding crowd could add pressure but not wanting it to distract him from keeping the situation calm. He remembered countless training exercises about de-escalation, moments when remaining composed was the difference between safety and tragedy. The officer's voice wavered as he asked the director to step out of the car. The director, fully aware of the risk, responded carefully. He explained that exiting too quickly could be dangerous for both of them, especially if other officers arrived without knowing who he was. He suggested that the officer stay calm and maintain distance while he remained in the vehicle. It was a delicate balance of asserting authority without escalating tension further. Minutes passed, each one feeling much longer than it actually was. The director observed the officer closely, noting the signs of stress. Shallow breathing, a tight grip on the gun, eyes scanning for imagined threats. He recognized that fear was driving the officer's actions, not malice. He also realized that this incident could become dangerous very quickly if either of them made a wrong move. Listen, the director said in a steady voice. I am not here to fight you. I'm the FBI director. I have identification. You do not need to worry about me. Let's just stay calm and handle this properly. The officer's hands trembled slightly as he continued to hold the gun, torn between instinct and reason. He spoke into his radio requesting backup, unsure if he was overreacting or if this truly was a situation that required reinforcement. The dispatcher's voice came through faintly, asking for clarification. The officer explained what he saw, emphasizing the swerving and the unknown identity of the driver. The director listened, knowing that help was on the way, but also aware that every second counted. He continued to speak in a calm, authoritative tone, guiding the officer through the next steps. He suggested that the officer take a deep breath, focus on the facts, and confirm the identity before making any further actions. The young officer nodded slightly, trying to regain composure though fear still ruled his mind. As backup approached, the director kept his hands visible and his voice steady. The sound of sirens and the sight of approaching vehicles added tension to the scene. But he remained calm, knowing that patience and clear communication were essential. He carefully explained to the approaching officers what had happened so far, emphasizing the importance of de-escalation and verification. The arriving officers quickly assessed the situation, identifying the director and confirming his identity. Relief washed over everyone present. The young officer lowered his weapon fully, shame and embarrassment mixed with relief as he realized the magnitude of the misunderstanding. The director, still composed, maintained professionalism, ensuring that the situation remained calm until everyone was clear on the facts. The crowd of witnesses continued to watch, some whispering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The director took mental notes of the entire encounter, reflecting on how quickly a routine stop could escalate into a dangerous standoff. He understood that fear, inexperience, and lack of information could lead to poor decisions, even among trained law enforcement personnel. Finally, after several tense minutes, the director was allowed to leave, escorted briefly by the backup officers to ensure his safety. He returned to his vehicle, took a deep breath, and began driving again, his mind still processing the events. He knew that the incident would prompt internal reviews, discussions about training, and perhaps disciplinary action for the officer involved. But his focus remained on the importance of remaining calm and professional in every situation. As he drove home, the director reflected on the delicate balance of authority and restraint, the importance of communication, and the human factors that often influence law enforcement interactions. He understood that fear and inexperience could lead to dangerous situations, but he also recognized the potential for growth and learning from such moments. The experience, though frightening, reinforced his commitment to professionalism, patience, and leadership. By the time he reached his quiet suburban street, the sun had fully set and the night felt calm once again. He parked his car, still thinking about the young officer and the lessons that both of them would take away from this encounter. It was a reminder that even in positions of authority and experience, danger could come from unexpected places, and that the human element, the mix of fear, instinct, and judgment, always played a crucial role. He stepped out of his car, took a deep breath, and walked towards his home, knowing that while the day's challenges were far from over, he had handled a situation that could have ended very differently. He had remained calm, professional, and composed, and in doing so, had ensured safety for himself, the officer, and everyone nearby. The night felt quieter now, but the lessons of the evening would linger, a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, calmness, and understanding in a world where even the most routine situations could turn dangerous in an instant. The tension did not immediately fade after the initial stop. The young officer, still holding his gun, was overwhelmed by the situation. His training had prepared him for danger, but nothing had prepared him for this. He had been trained to trust his instincts, but now, faced with a calm, authoritative figure identifying himself as the FBI director, his instincts seemed to clash with reality. Fear made his thoughts scatter, and every sound of approaching vehicles or voices from the roadside felt like it could escalate the moment further. The director remained seated, his hands visible, his voice steady. He understood that the young officer needed time to process, so he spoke in calm, deliberate sentences, trying to ease the tension. "Officer, you are safe," he said. "I understand that this is stressful. Please, let's handle this carefully. His tone was neither condescending nor aggressive. It was measured, showing the kind of authority that comes with years of experience, but also the human understanding of fear. The officer's grip on his firearm tightened and loosened repeatedly. His eyes darted around, looking for threats that weren't there. The director noticed each small movement, each sign of stress, and adjusted his tone to remain reassuring. "I am the FBI director," he repeated gently. "You can lower your weapon. There is no danger here." The officer radioed for backup, his voice shaky. He explained to dispatch that he had pulled over a vehicle, and he suspected danger. His words came out rushed, and he repeated himself several times. The director listened, understanding that the officer's panic was growing, and knew he needed to be patient. He did not make sudden movements, nor did he speak harshly. Every word was meant to anchor the officer's scattered thoughts. As the backup approached, the director continued to explain himself. He showed his credentials again and clarified the situation, emphasizing that this was a misunderstanding, not a threat. The arriving officers quickly assessed the scene. They recognized the director immediately and began to signal the young officer to calm down. Relief and embarrassment began to mix on the officer's face, but he still kept his gun pointed, nervous about losing control in front of his peers. Nearby, several bystanders watched the scene unfold. Some had stopped their cars to record what was happening, while others whispered to each other, unsure whether to be concerned or merely observers. The director noticed them but did not let their presence distract him. He focused entirely on the officer, knowing that any sudden external movement could make the young man more anxious. The human mind, especially under stress, tends to latch onto unexpected stimuli, and he knew he had to manage both fear and focus in the officer. Minutes felt like hours as the situation slowly began to change. One of the arriving officers, more experienced and calm, approached and spoke to the young officer in a low, steady voice. "Lower your weapon," he said. "The man is identified. He is not a threat." The young officer hesitated but finally relaxed his posture slightly. The director noticed the small change and continued to offer verbal reassurance. "You are doing the right thing by staying cautious," he said. "Now let's resolve this safely." The director's patience paid off. The young officer's breathing slowed. His hands stopped trembling as much, and he lowered his gun almost fully. The scene began to feel less like a standoff and more like a misunderstanding being corrected. Still, the tension remained palpable. The director understood that while the immediate danger had passed, the emotional impact on the officer was still significant. He spoke kindly, acknowledging the officer's concern for safety. "It's normal to feel this way in a situation you're not prepared for. You acted out of caution, which is important, but we also need to handle identification carefully next time." As the young officer's panic subsided, he began to ask questions. "Are you really?" he stammered, almost unable to say the words. The director replied gently, confirming his identity and explaining the responsibilities he carried. He spoke not with arrogance but with clarity, emphasizing the seriousness of the moment and the importance of understanding protocol in such situations. The arriving officers helped the young man regain control, guiding him through proper procedure. They reminded him that verification is critical and that fear must be balanced with caution and judgment. The director nodded silently, recognizing that this was an important teaching moment. It was not about shaming the officer, but ensuring that future interactions could be safer for everyone involved. Witnesses continued to watch, some whispering about the extraordinary sight of an FBI director being stopped by a local cop. It was unusual, startling even, but the director remained composed. He knew that his example, calm in the midst of potential danger, would resonate more than any words could. The human element of authority was powerful, but only when paired with empathy and understanding. Finally, the immediate confusion settled. The young officer's hands, once shaking, were now steady. He lowered his weapon entirely, still visibly shaken but aware that the situation was under control. The director, showing no frustration, calmly instructed him on proper protocol for situations involving federal officials. It was a rare circumstance, and he wanted to ensure that the officer walked away with the knowledge needed to prevent future incidents. The director reflected on the entire event as he remained in the car for a few more moments. He noted how fear and inexperience could create high-stakes situations, even among those sworn to protect the public. His mind cataloged each detail, The officer's body language, the speed of his reactions, the words that helped de-escalate the situation. It was a real-life lesson in human behavior under stress, one he would later recount carefully to colleagues for training purposes. The officer, after consulting with his peers, finally began to relax more. He lowered his head slightly, a mix of relief and embarrassment crossing his features. He realized the gravity of his actions and the potential consequences, but he also began to understand the importance of patience, verification, and measured response. The director, without judgment, acknowledged his effort, emphasizing that learning from mistakes is a critical part of growth in law enforcement. As the tension eased, the director spoke again, gently. "This is how we learn," he said. "Every moment teaches us something. Today we learned about fear, authority, and caution. Let's take those lessons forward." The officer listened, nodding, absorbing the wisdom without feeling humiliated. It was a moment of genuine human connection in a highly stressful encounter. Eventually, the officer signaled that the director could leave. He carefully unbuckled his seatbelt and prepared to drive again, aware that while the immediate threat was over, the experience would resonate with everyone involved for a long time. The young officer watched, still processing the events, knowing that this was a story he would remember for the rest of his career. As the director pulled away, the lights of the suburban streets passed by calmly. He thought about the thin line between caution and overreaction, about how fear could cloud judgment, and how calm, human leadership could diffuse even the most tense situations. The experience was more than a personal encounter. It was a lesson in patience, empathy, and communication under pressure. The young officer remained behind, talking quietly with his peers, reflecting on what had happened. He knew mistakes had been made, but he also knew he had witnessed professionalism and human understanding at its finest. The director had managed to keep a potentially dangerous situation under control without escalating fear or aggression. It was a rare demonstration of experience, calm, and humanity intersecting in the middle of chaos. The director drove on, the night surrounding him, his mind still analyzing the encounter. He considered the lessons for law enforcement, for human interaction, and for leadership. He understood that fear is natural. Mistakes are human, but professionalism, patience, and clear communication could prevent tragedy. The night was calm now, but the incident would remain vivid, a reminder of how quickly ordinary moments could turn extraordinary, and how important it is to navigate them with care and understanding. The moments following the tense stop were filled with quiet reflection for both the FBI director and the young officer. The director had finally been cleared by the arriving backup officers, and the situation no longer felt like a standoff. Still, the young officer was deeply shaken. His hands were steady now, but his mind raced with questions and a gnawing awareness of how easily the encounter could have ended in disaster. Every detail, every decision, every reaction replayed in his mind, each one magnified by the reality of the situation he had faced. The director, still seated in his car, watched the young officer with understanding. He recognized fear, inexperience, and human error, knowing that the young man had acted out of a sincere desire to protect and serve, yet the potential danger of what had just occurred could not be ignored. This was not a moment for blame, but for reflection and learning. The director remained calm, projecting authority and patience, knowing that the young officer needed guidance as much as he needed reassurance. The experienced backup officers gathered the young man quietly to the side. They spoke in low voices, helping him understand the gravity of what had occurred without causing shame. One officer placed a hand on his shoulder, saying gently, "You acted out of caution, and that's important. But now we have to review what happened and see how to handle it differently next time." The young officer nodded, still feeling a mix of relief and embarrassment. His respect for the director had grown, tempered with a newfound understanding of the seriousness of protocol. The director stepped out of the car, his posture calm and professional. He spoke directly to the young officer, his voice steady and measured. "I know this was frightening," he said. "You acted on instinct, and that's natural. But understanding who you are dealing with and verifying before taking certain actions is just as important. We must learn from every moment." The young officer listened, absorbing every word, aware that he was hearing wisdom born from decades of experience and high-pressure encounters. The crowd of onlookers had not dispersed entirely. Some whispered to each other, astonished by the rare sight of an FBI director being stopped and held at gunpoint. Others captured snippets on their phones, eager to share the unusual event. The director, sensing the curiosity but needing to maintain calm, kept his focus entirely on the officers, ignoring the distractions. He understood that human attention, especially under stress, could be easily drawn in the wrong direction, and his goal was to ensure the situation was resolved safely. The young officer, after taking a deep breath, finally began to relax slightly. He realized the potential consequences of his actions and felt a pang of guilt for the fear he had caused. Yet he also understood that mistakes are part of human experience, particularly in high-stakes jobs like law enforcement. With guidance from the backup officers and the director's calm demeanor, he began to internalize the lesson. Fear can be managed, decisions can be deliberate, and patience can prevent escalation. The director guided the discussion, emphasizing the importance of communication and verification. He asked the young officer to recount every detail from his perspective, listening carefully to understand his thought process. This was not to point fingers, but to identify where fear had influenced judgment and how protocol could be improved. As the officer spoke, the director nodded, occasionally offering clarifying questions or suggestions for alternative actions. The conversation was calm, professional, and educational. After the discussion, the director reflected on the encounter, recognizing how quickly human perception can alter decisions. The young officer had not acted out of malice, yet his fear and inexperience had nearly turned a routine stop into a life-threatening event. The director knew that in law enforcement, understanding the human mind and its reactions is as crucial as knowing procedures or laws. Every officer, every interaction, carries the potential for unpredictability, and the ability to remain calm and clear-headed can make all the difference. Nearby, the backup officers prepared to escort the director safely out of the area. They ensured that the young officer had recovered enough to follow instructions and that the scene was secure. The director moved with them, careful to maintain a calm presence, aware that any sudden action could reignite anxiety. He spoke quietly to the officers, sharing his thoughts on de-escalation and emphasizing the value of empathy when interacting with others, particularly under stress. The young officer stayed close to his peers, absorbing every word. He began to understand that professionalism does not mean eliminating fear, but managing it. He realized that respect for authority and the ability to follow guidance can prevent tragedies. The director had modeled this behavior, showing patience, calmness, and humanity in a situation where fear had initially dominated. As they walked, the director briefly addressed the bystanders. He thanked them for their calmness and for not interfering, recognizing the power of a composed crowd in preventing escalation. He reminded everyone that what they had witnessed was a lesson in patience, caution, and understanding human behavior under stress. The audience, captivated by his calm authority, listened quietly, absorbing the message in a way that only real-life examples can convey. Once the director was safely in his vehicle again, he reflected on the lessons of the evening. He thought about fear, judgment, and responsibility. He considered how easily human error could lead to dangerous consequences and how crucial calmness, verification, and communication are in preventing such outcomes. His mind cataloged each detail, ready to be shared with colleagues and used in training future officers. The young officer remained on the roadside, speaking quietly with his peers. He acknowledged his mistake and reflected on what he had learned. He realized that even in positions of authority, mistakes happen, but the key is to learn from them and improve. He admired the director's ability to remain composed, recognizing that this behavior had prevented a potentially tragic outcome. Meanwhile, the director continued to drive home, his mind replaying the incident. He reflected on the fragility of perception, the influence of fear, and the importance of empathy in law enforcement. He knew that this encounter would be a lasting memory, both for him and for the young officer. It was a reminder that human behavior can be unpredictable, but calm leadership, patience, and understanding can prevent disaster. The night air was quiet as he drove through suburban streets. He thought about the young officer, hoping that this experience would help him grow and become a more confident, careful, and understanding law enforcement professional. The director knew that fear is natural. Mistakes are human, but professionalism, patience, and clear communication could prevent escalation and protect lives. By the time he reached his home, the director had processed the entire situation. He parked his car, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The evening had been tense, challenging, and educational. It had shown the power of human fear and inexperience, but also the strength of calm authority, empathy, and patience. The director knew that both he and the young officer had learned valuable lessons that would stay with them for a lifetime. The night was quiet now, but the incident had left a mark, a reminder of the unpredictable nature of human interactions and the importance of handling them with care, understanding, and professionalism. The next day, the young officer returned to the precinct with a heavy sense of responsibility weighing on him. He had spent the night replaying the events over and over in his mind. The fear, embarrassment, and realization of how easily the situation could have turned dangerous lingered. His colleagues greeted him cautiously, aware of the unusual incident that had taken place the night before. Some offered supportive words, while others simply observed silently, waiting to see how the situation would unfold. The department began its internal review immediately. Officers gathered to provide statements, recounting what had happened and evaluating the decisions that had been made. The young officer's actions were analyzed thoroughly. While it was clear that he had acted out of concern and caution, it was equally evident that his lack of experience and judgment had contributed to the potential danger. The senior officers recognized the need for proper accountability, ensuring that lessons would be learned from the incident. Meanwhile, the FBI director resumed his duties, attending briefings and meetings, but his mind often wandered back to the stop. He reflected on the delicate balance between authority and patience, on how quickly a misjudgment could escalate, and on the human factors that influence decision-making. The incident would later become a case study within his department, highlighting the importance of de-escalation, communication, and verifying facts before taking action. Back at the precinct, the young officer faced discussions with supervisors about protocol and decision-making. The conversations were firm but fair. He was reminded of the responsibilities inherent in law enforcement and the consequences of mistakes. The officers emphasized that while fear is natural, it must be managed and proper verification is crucial, especially in situations involving federal officials. The young man listened intently, absorbing every word and understanding that this was not merely a personal correction, but a lesson for professional growth. He was temporarily relieved of active duty pending further review. The decision was not punitive but precautionary, giving him time to reflect and for the department to ensure that all procedures were reviewed thoroughly. During this period, he spent hours reviewing training materials, reading about de-escalation techniques, and discussing strategies with more experienced officers. Each conversation, each document, reinforced the importance of measured responses and calm thinking under pressure. The FBI director, aware of the ongoing review, maintained contact with the local police department, offering insight where appropriate and providing perspective on how to prevent such incidents in the future. He emphasized the importance of collaboration, training, and understanding between federal and local law enforcement. His goal was not to blame but to educate, to ensure that a similar scenario could be avoided. The young officer during this time began to reflect on his own reactions. He acknowledged the role of fear in his decisions, recognizing how quickly it can cloud judgment. He considered the lessons from the director's calm demeanor, understanding the power of patience and empathy in diffusing potentially dangerous situations. Conversations with colleagues and mentors helped him contextualize his experience, turning embarrassment and fear into a meaningful opportunity for learning. Community reactions began to surface as news of the incident spread. Many people discussed the story, emphasizing the unusual nature of the FBI director being stopped by a local officer. The incident sparked conversations about training, communication, and safety protocols. Social media was filled with debates and reflections, some praising the officer's caution, others emphasizing the need for better preparation and awareness. The director's measured response and professionalism were widely noted, serving as an example of how experience and composure can prevent tragedy. Within the department, senior officers held sessions to review the events, identify weaknesses in procedure, and update training programs. They emphasized the importance of clear communication, verifying identities and managing fear during high-pressure encounters. The young officer participated actively, sharing his perspective and acknowledging where he had gone wrong. His honesty and willingness to learn impressed his supervisors, who recognized that accountability and growth often come from confronting mistakes head-on. The FBI director continued his routine work, but he also began drafting guidelines for interactions between federal and local officers. He highlighted how misunderstandings can arise and the importance of professional conduct in preventing escalation. The document he prepared focused on empathy, communication, and calm authority as tools for navigating tense situations. His goal was to ensure that future officers, regardless of rank or experience, could learn from the incident and respond appropriately. Over the following weeks, the young officer slowly regained confidence. The experience remained a cautionary memory, but he approached his duties with renewed understanding and seriousness. Mentorship from experienced officers combined with reflection and study helped him internalize lessons that would guide his decisions in the future. He learned that professionalism is not only about following orders, but also about understanding human behavior, recognizing fear, and responding with patience. The department also reviewed its policies on traffic stops, particularly those involving unmarked vehicles or high-ranking officials. Training sessions were updated to include scenarios similar to the one that had occurred, emphasizing de-escalation, verification, and proper communication. Officers were encouraged to practice calm reasoning and to seek guidance when uncertain. The incident became a reference point for teaching, a real-life example of how human factors influence law enforcement interactions. The FBI director occasionally followed up with the young officer, offering encouragement and feedback. He acknowledged the officer's efforts to learn and grow, reinforcing the idea that mistakes can lead to improvement when approached with honesty and willingness to change. These conversations helped the young officer feel supported rather than judged, allowing him to see the incident as a pivotal moment in his career, rather than a purely negative experience. Community response continued to unfold. Local residents shared stories and opinions, emphasizing the importance of law enforcement accountability and careful judgment. The incident sparked discussions about the balance between authority and fear, highlighting how crucial human understanding is in high-stakes situations. The director's approach was widely praised, serving as a model for others in positions of responsibility. As the young officer returned to active duty, he carried the lessons of that night with him. His awareness of human behavior, his understanding of de-escalation techniques, and his recognition of the importance of patience and verification were deeply ingrained. Each interaction he had with the public or colleagues reminded him of the responsibility inherent in his role and the potential consequences of impulsive decisions. The director, meanwhile, continued to reflect on the incident in his own way. He considered how easily human error, fear, and inexperience can create dangerous situations, even for seasoned professionals. He reinforced within his agency the importance of empathy, calmness, and clear communication, not only with the public but also between federal and local officers. The experience had highlighted the human element in law enforcement, showing that even the most well-trained personnel are susceptible to fear and mistakes. Months later, the young officer had regained confidence and was fully reintegrated into active duty. The lessons from the stop remained a guiding principle in his approach to policing. The director's calm and professional handling of the situation had left a lasting impression, shaping how the officer viewed responsibility, human behavior, and the importance of patience and empathy. The entire incident became a valuable lesson for both the department and the wider law enforcement community. It demonstrated that human error, fear, and misjudgment can escalate situations quickly, but that calm authority, communication, and understanding can prevent tragedy. The young officer, the director, and the entire department had emerged from the experience wiser, more aware, and better prepared for the unpredictable challenges that law enforcement often presents. The weeks following the incident became a time of reflection and resolution. The young officer, now back on active duty, approached each day with heightened awareness. He had learned the weight of responsibility that came with even the smallest decisions. The memory of holding a gun on the FBI director remained vivid in his mind, a stark reminder of how quickly situations can escalate and how much care is required in every interaction. He took time each day to remind himself of the lessons learned: patience, verification, communication, and empathy, the department's internal review concluded, and the officer faced formal consequences. He was temporarily assigned to administrative duties and required to attend additional training sessions focused on de-escalation, decision-making under pressure, and communication with both the public and fellow law enforcement personnel. The measures were firm but fair, intended to ensure that the experience became a cornerstone for professional growth, rather than simply a punitive action. The officer accepted the outcome with humility, recognizing that accountability was a key part of law enforcement. At the same time, the FBI director continued his responsibilities, reflecting privately on the event. He had encountered many dangerous situations throughout his career, but this one stood out for its unusual nature and the lesson it offered about the human side of law enforcement. The director had relied on patience, calm authority, and experience to navigate the situation safely. He knew that fear and misjudgment could happen to anyone, and that understanding human reactions was as vital as knowing law and procedure. The officer, in his reflective moments, thought about the director's composure and professionalism. He realized that in tense situations, authority is not only about rank or power, but about calm, clear, and empathetic communication. He began to integrate these insights into his daily practice, approaching interactions with both colleagues and the public more thoughtfully. Every stop, every decision carried with it the memory of that night and the responsibility to act with care. Community interest in the story remained high. Local residents continued to discuss the unusual incident, emphasizing both the officer's caution and the director's professionalism. The event became a teaching point for conversations about public safety, communication, and the importance of law enforcement training. Social media debates highlighted the need for better protocols, with many praising the director's handling as a model of calm, measured authority. The FBI director later shared his perspective in internal training sessions. Without disclosing unnecessary details, he discussed the importance of patience, verifying information, and understanding human reactions under stress. He emphasized that even highly trained officers could make mistakes when fear and uncertainty take over, and he advocated for systems and procedures to prevent similar situations. His insights were integrated into training programs, serving as a real-life example of managing high-pressure encounters. Meanwhile, the young officer began to mentor newer recruits, sharing his experience openly. He spoke about fear, responsibility, and the importance of remaining calm. He emphasized that accountability was not about punishment alone, but about learning and growing. His honesty and willingness to discuss his mistakes made him a respected figure among his peers, someone who could guide others through the challenges of law enforcement. Over time, the incident became a reference point in both departments. Policies were updated to emphasize proper identification, communication, and verification procedures. Officers were encouraged to practice calm decision-making, to recognize the human factors that influence judgment, and to consider empathy and patience as essential tools in their work. The director's intervention and the officer's learning became intertwined lessons. Fear must be managed, authority must be exercised wisely, and human understanding is essential to preventing mistakes. The young officer found himself approaching situations differently. He paused more often to assess circumstances, considered multiple perspectives, and communicated more clearly with colleagues and civilians. The memory of that night, the fear, the tension, the realization of potential consequences, remained with him, guiding his actions and decisions. Each interaction reinforced the importance of calmness, clarity, and empathy. For the FBI director, the incident served as a reminder of the unpredictability inherent in human behavior. Even with experience, preparation, and knowledge, unexpected situations can arise. He reflected on the importance of teaching, mentoring, and creating systems that help prevent mistakes. The night had highlighted both the fragility and resilience of human decision-making, and the director knew that sharing the lessons widely could save lives and prevent future incidents. Months later, the young officer fully resumed normal duties, carrying with him a newfound maturity. He continued to engage with the community, building trust and demonstrating professionalism. Each day reinforced the lessons from that night, showing him that growth often comes from confronting mistakes and learning from them. He was no longer just a cautious officer. He had become someone who could think clearly under pressure, make measured decisions, and guide others with empathy. The director continued to oversee his agency with the same dedication and professionalism, integrating the insights from the encounter into broader discussions about law enforcement practices. He remained committed to fostering collaboration between federal and local agencies, emphasizing understanding communication and the human elements that influence decisions in high-stakes situations. The incident eventually faded from immediate public attention, but its impact endured. The young officer became a model of accountability and growth, while the director's handling became an example of leadership under pressure. Both had learned important lessons about human behavior, fear, responsibility, and the power of calm authority. In reflection, the story highlighted the delicate balance between caution and judgment, fear and control in law enforcement. It demonstrated that mistakes, though sometimes dangerous, can be transformed into opportunities for learning and growth. The director and the young officer had both emerged wiser, more aware, and better prepared for the unpredictable challenges of their roles. The event remained a reminder that professionalism, patience, empathy, and clear communication are essential in every interaction, and that human understanding can prevent even the most dangerous situations from turning tragic.